The sun was a hammer on the back of Eli McCade's neck. He stood by the fence, the very one his grandfather had built, and watched the truck kick up a long, slow cloud of dust down the dirt road. That cloud was his entire life, everything he had worked for since he was a boy, rolling away. The last of his herd, sold to pay a debt that felt like it had always been there, waiting for him. The sound of the engine faded, and the silence that came back was worse. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was a heavy, empty sound. The ranch yard felt too big without the lowing of cattle, the creak of the gate, the life of it. He looked at the house, needing a new roof. He looked at the barn, its door hanging crooked. All of it was his, and all of it felt like it was accusing him. He was a cowboy without cows. A rancher without a ranch, really. The bank had been polite, but the papers in his kitchen were not. He felt hollowed out, like someone had taken a shovel and scooped everything important right out of him. His hands, tough and scarred from rope and reins, had nothing to hold. He couldn't stand the sight of the house, so he did the only thing that ever made sense to him. He walked to the barn to saddle his horse, Duke. Duke was an old bay gelding, calm and steady. He blew a warm, soft breath into Eli's palm as Eli tightened the cinch. "Nowhere to go, buddy," Eli whispered, his voice rough. "Just away from here." He swung up into the saddle, and the familiar feel in it was a small comfort. He pointed Duke not towards town, where he'd only see pity in people's eyes, but west, towards the broken land where the desert started to rise into rocky canyons. He rode for hours. The scrubby grassland gave way to tougher plants, then to red dirt and sandstone. He crossed a dry wash, Duke's hooves clicking on the round stones. He climbed a rise, and the world opened up. This was the edge of the reservation, a land of deep, silent canyons and old, old stories. Eli didn't know those stories, but he respected the quiet. Here, his own failures seemed smaller, just one man's trouble under a huge, empty sky. He let Duke pick his way down a narrow trail into a canyon. The air cooled a little in the shadows. It was quiet, just the sound of the horses breathing and the occasional scuttle of a lizard. He was thinking of nothing and everything, the look on the banker's face, the weight of the saddle he'd have to sell next, the ghost of his father's voice saying, "A man is his land." That's when he saw it. A flash of dark red and blue against the gray-green of a juniper tree. It was wrong. Nothing out here was that color. He reined Duke in and squinted. It looked like cloth. Maybe a backpack left by a hiker? He nudged Duke forward, the horse's ears twitching with curiosity. As he got closer, the shape became clear, and his heart gave a hard, sick thump in his chest. It was a person. A woman, sitting against the trunk of the juniper. But she wasn't resting. Her arms were pulled back around the thick trunk. He could see the rough, tan rope biting into her wrists. Eli froze. Every bad thought, every strange story he'd ever heard about these canyons, rushed into his head. Was she hurt? Was this a crime? His hand went to the old rifle and its scabbard on his saddle, but he didn't pull it out. Something about the scene was too still, too deliberate, for a simple attack. He slid off Duke and tied the reins to a low bush. "Hello?" He called out, his voice too loud in the quiet canyon. The woman's head lifted slowly. She had a strong, tired face, her dark hair partly falling across it. Her eyes found his. They weren't pleading. They were deep and watchful, like the still water in a canyon pool. She didn't scream for help. She just looked at him, as if she'd been waiting. Eli walked closer, his boots crunching on the gravel. That's when he saw the rest of it. A simple leather bag sat neatly at her feet. Around her neck, on a thin cord, hung a tiny basket, woven so tightly it looked like a piece of jewelry. And above her, nailed right into the living wood of the juniper, was a piece of old, weathered plank. Someone had burned words into it with a hot iron or a careful knife. The letters were deep and black. Asterisk, asterisk. Only the pure of heart may cut her free. Asterisk, asterisk. Eli stared at the sign. He read it twice. A cold trickle, different from the desert heat, went down his spine. This wasn't an accident. This was meant. He looked from the sign to the woman's tied wrists, back to the sign. The words echoed in the silent air between them. He took another step, his shadow falling over her. He reached for the knife on his belt. It was a simple, sharp stockman's knife, the one he used for everything from cutting baling twine to trimming a hoof. The blade made a soft sound as it opened. The woman's eyes locked onto the knife, then flicked up to his face. For the first time, she spoke. Her voice was dry, but clear. "Do you know what those words mean, Ryder?" Eli's hand stopped. The sharp point of the blade hovered near the rope. He looked into her tired, proud face and then back at the sign. Pure of heart, the words felt like a physical weight. Who was he? A man who had lost everything, whose own family's land had slipped through his fingers, to claim such a thing. He felt a sudden, sharp shame that had nothing to do with her. He slowly closed the knife and put it back in his pocket. "No," he said, his own voice a rough whisper. "I guess I don't." He took a step back, his mind churning. He couldn't just leave her. But cutting her down felt like a claim he wasn't sure he had the right to make. He was stuck there, in the hot, quiet canyon, with a woman tied to a tree, and a sign that asked a question he was afraid to answer. The woman watched him put the knife away. Her shoulders, which had been tense, settled just a little against the rough bark. It wasn't relief, exactly. More like she was settling in for a longer wait. Eli stood there, feeling foolish. The desert sun didn't care about his confusion. It beat down on both of them equally. He finally moved, not towards her, but over to a patch of shade a few yards away. He sat down on a flat rock, the heat of it coming through his jeans. He took off his hat and ran a hand through his sweat-damp hair. Duke shifted his weight nearby, swishing his tail at a fly. "What's your name?" Eli asked. His voice still sounded too loud here. "Kai," she said. She said it like it was a fact, not an offer. "Eli?" He nodded. Then he gestured vaguely at the rope, the tree, the sign. "Who did this to you?" "My family," she said. The words were simple, but they hit Eli like a punch. He'd imagined a monster, a stranger, some evil lurking in the rocks. Not a family. Why? Was all he could manage. Kai took a slow breath, as if deciding how much to pour into a cup that might be too small. "There is sickness in our home. My niece and my brother's wife. A bad cough, a weakness that won't leave. The elders, they felt a chindi, a troubled spirit. They said it was with me." Eli knew that word, chindi, but only as a whisper from the edges of town, something people didn't talk about much. A ghost, a bad energy. "This," she said, shifting her wrist slightly in the bindings, "is not to hurt me. It is to help them. It is the old way. The one who is touched is taken out, away from the people, bound to the juniper, the tree that is strong for medicine. For 4 days and nights you stay. You let the wind and the sun and the night take it. If a person comes, a person from outside, with no anger in their heart for us, if they choose to cut the rope," she looked right at him, "then it is a sign. The sickness stayed with the tree. It did not follow the cut rope. The one who is cut free can return, and the sickness is gone." Eli listened. It was like hearing a story from another world. A world where sickness wasn't just germs, but something you could leave tied to a tree. His first roaring instinct was to stand up and say that was crazy, that he should call the sheriff, an ambulance, someone with authority. But he looked at her face. There was no fear of the tree. There was a deep tiredness, a sadness, but also a kind of fierce acceptance. This was her people's way. She believed in it. Who was he, a man who couldn't even keep his cows, to tell her she was wrong? So if I cut you down right now, Eli said slowly, that fixes it? It is a sign, she repeated. The act of a pure heart, a heart with no stake in our trouble. It has the power to break the chain. Pure of heart. The words from the sign hung between them again. Eli looked down at his own hands. They were good at fixing fences, at pulling calves, at holding a rope. But were they the hands of a pure heart? He thought of the bitterness in his gut these past months, the resentment he felt driving past bigger, successful ranches, the sharp, ugly words he'd snapped at the banker, the silent blame he carried for his father, for the drought, for the whole world. That didn't feel pure. It felt dirty and heavy. I can't call anyone, he said, more to himself than to her. No phone signal out here for miles. He looked around the canyon walls, as if they might offer an answer. And if I ride all the way back to town for the sheriff, that's a day gone. You would leave me here? Kai asked. There was no judgment in the question. No, Eli said, the word coming out fast. No, I'm not leaving. He stood up, brushing the dust off his pants. He walked over to Duke and untied his bedroll and his canteen. He had a little food, some jerky, a couple of biscuits. He brought the canteen over to her first. He hesitated, then stepped close. He could smell the scent of juniper and dry earth. He held the canteen to her lips, and she drank, closing her eyes for a moment as the water touched her throat. It was a strangely intimate thing, to help a stranger drink. He pulled the canteen back. I'm going to stay right here, Eli said. Until I figure out what to do. He made a small camp in the shade. He didn't build a fire. The evening was coming, and the air would cool fast. He gave Kai a piece of jerky, which she ate slowly. He sat against a rock, watching the light change on the canyon walls, turning them from orange to a deep burning red dot as the blue dusk settled in. The first noises of the night started. A distant coyote, the rustle of something small in the bushes. Kai's voice came, quiet in the growing dark. The stories say the Chindi likes the confusion, the anger, the regret. It feeds on a heart that is not clear. Eli didn't answer. He pulled his jacket tighter. He was a practical man. He believed in rain or no rain, in fair prices and bad luck. He didn't believe in ghost sickness. But out here, in the deep quiet, with a woman tied to a tree and a sign speaking of purity, his own beliefs felt thin and small. His own heart, when he listened to it, was a noisy, crowded place full of every mistake he'd ever made. And in the dark, those mistakes felt very close. The darkness in the canyon was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the empty quiet of the ranch. This quiet felt full of small sounds, the scuttle of a beetle, the sigh of wind through the juniper needles, the slow, even sound of Kai's breathing, and full of thoughts. Eli's thoughts were the loudest dot. He sat with his back against the cool rock, his saddle blanket pulled around his shoulders. Duke was a dark shape, dozing on his feet nearby. Eli couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the sign. Only the pure of heart. The words chased each other around and around in his head. He wasn't a bad man. He knew that. He'd never cheated anyone, never stole, never looked for a fight. But pure? That was a high, hard word. A word for saints in storybooks, not for a broke rancher sitting in the dirt dot. He thought about the day he had to sell his best breeding bull, the one his father had raised. He'd felt a hot, ugly anger that day, a resentment so deep it tasted like metal in his mouth. He'd blamed the neighbor who bought it for a low price, even though the neighbor was just being smart. That didn't feel pure. He thought about the letter from the bank. He hadn't cried. He just sat at the kitchen table and felt a cold hollow open up inside him. Then he'd taken his favorite coffee mug, the one that said, "World's Best Grandpa," even though he wasn't one, and he'd thrown it against the wall so hard, shattered into 100 pieces. The cleanup felt like a punishment. That storm inside him, it wasn't pure either. A soft sound came from the juniper tree. It was Kai. She was humming. It was a low, tuneless sound, not quite a song. It was the sound a person makes to remember they're still there, to keep the big dark from swallowing them whole. Eli understood that sound. He'd made it himself, working alone in the barn late at night. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice a gravelly whisper in the dark. The humming stopped. "Sleep is hard when you cannot turn," she said. He could hear the strain in her voice, the ache of muscles held in one place for too long. "You want some more water?" "Yes, thank you." He stood, his joints stiff, and fetched the canteen. In the faint starlight, he could just see the outline of her. He held the canteen to her lips again, his hand steadying the back of her head this time. Her hair was coarse and thick. She drank deeply. "You asked me why I am here," she said when he pulled the water away. "Now I ask you, why are you here, Eli? This is not your land. This is a place people pass through. They do not stay." He let out a long breath and sat down in the dirt near her, not in his camp. It felt easier to talk in the dark. "I lost my ranch," he said. The words were simple, but saying them out loud to a stranger, to the night, made them real in a new way. "Well, I'm losing it. The bank, there's no money. The cows are all gone. I rode out here because there's nothing to look at back there. Just empty pens and debt. Out here, the problems are old, stone old. Makes mine feel small for a little while." Kai was silent for a moment. "You feel you are tied to something too," she said finally. "Not a tree, but to a memory, to a name that is now broken." Her words landed right in the center of that hollow place inside him. He hadn't thought of it like that. A binding. He was bound to his father's dream, a dream that had dried up and blown away. He was bound to the idea of being Eli McCade, the rancher, and now that was gone. He was just a man in the dark with a horse. "Yeah," was all he could say. "Yeah, I guess I am." "The chindi," she said, her voice low. "It does not always come from the dead. Sometimes it is a living sickness, a trouble that will not let go. It wraps around a person, a family, like a bad vine. It makes good things wither. It turns hearts sour." Eli stared into the darkness towards her. He wasn't sure he believed in her spirit, but he believed in the withering. He'd seen it in his own fields. He'd felt it in his own heart. That sourness. It was a perfect word for it. How do you get rid of it? He asked. If not this? He gestured at the rope, though she probably couldn't see. "Sometimes you must be seen," she said. "Truly seen. By someone who is not tangled in the same vine. Their eyes are clear. They can see where the knot is. Sometimes they can help you cut it." Eli thought about that. Nobody had really seen him in months. People in town saw the failure. The banker saw the numbers. He hadn't let anyone see the shame. A sharp, cold wind kicked up suddenly, funneling down the canyon. It whistled over the rocks, and it sounded almost like a voice. Duke snorted and shifted nervously. Eli felt the hair on his arm stand up. It was just the wind, he told himself. Just the land breathing. But in that moment, with Kai's words about sour hearts and living sickness hanging in the air, it felt like more. It felt like the canyon was listening. It felt like all his regrets, the angry words, the broken mug, the silent goodbyes to his cows, were swirling around him in the cold air, seen and known. He pulled the blanket tighter. The night felt alive now, and watchful. He wasn't just waiting out the dark anymore. He was waiting for something inside himself to settle, to become clear. He looked over at the dark shape against the tree. Two people, tied in different ways, waiting for a sign neither of them knew how to read. The only thing that felt certain was the cold, and the growing understanding that this was about more than just a rope. The second day dawned hot and still. Eli woke with a stiff neck from the hard ground. The events of the night, the strange wind, the heavy conversation, felt like a dream in the sharp morning light. But Kai was still there. The rope was still there. The sign was still there. Dottie shared the last of his water and a dry biscuit with her. His supplies were running low. He'd have to leave soon, if only to get more. The thought of riding away, leaving her tied here, made his stomach turn. But the thought of cutting her down felt just as heavy, just as impossible. "I should go," he said, not looking at her. "To my place. Get more food. More water." Kai just nodded. She looked towards the east, where the sun was climbing. "A storm is coming," she said quietly. Eli glanced at the sky. It was a brilliant, cloudless blue. "Doesn't look like it." "It is not in the sky yet," she said. "It is in the air. You learn to feel it, living here." He didn't argue. He saddled Duke, his movements slow. He felt stuck, paralyzed. Every choice felt wrong. As he tightened the cinch, he finally said what was really on his mind. I could ride to the nearest town with a phone. I could get the law out here. They'd cut you down. They wouldn't care about the sign." He looked at her, waiting for her to agree, to give him an easy way out. Her face grew serious. "If you bring outsiders with their loud voices and their cold metal, if they cut the rope with hearts full of doubt and hurry, then the sickness is not broken. It is scattered. It may follow me home. Or it may follow you." She held his gaze. "The choice was given to you, rider, not to them. The canyon brought you. You must answer. The choice was given to you." The words pinned him where he stood. He couldn't pass this off to someone else. This was his to carry. He swung up into the saddle, but he didn't ride towards home. He didn't ride towards town. He rode a slow circle around the canyon floor, thinking. The sun burning hotter overhead by late afternoon, the sky began to change. First, a few high, thin clouds, like white scratches on blue glass. Then, a bank of darker clouds began to pile up in the west, far away but moving fast. The air changed. It became thick and charged, like before a lightning strike. The wind, which had been still, began to stir the dust in little whirlwinds. Kai was right. A storm was coming, and it was coming hard and fast. Eli hurried back to the camp. He stashed his saddle under a rocky overhang, a small shelter from the rain. He led Duke to higher ground, away from the dry wash that could become a river in minutes. The wind was picking up now, howling down the canyon with a new voice. It wasn't the whispering voice of last night. This was a shout. Then the rain came. It didn't start with drops. It came as a wall of water, icy and hard. It hammered the ground, filling the air with a roar and a spray. In seconds, Eli was soaked to the skin, his hat brim shedding a waterfall. He stumbled towards the juniper tree. What he saw froze his blood. The dry wash, just 30 yards from the tree, was no longer dry. A roiling, brown flood of water was surging through it, rising fast. It was grabbing branches, rocks, anything in its path. And the water was spreading, crawling across the canyon floor towards them. Kai was completely exposed. The rain lashed her face. The wind whipped her hair. She strained against the ropes, not to get free, but to turn and see the danger. He saw the flash of real fear in her eyes. This wasn't part of the ritual. This was the raw, wild land trying to take her. In that moment, every thought left Eli's head. The sign, his doubts, his impure heart, the bank, the ranch, all of it was washed away by the freezing rain, and the konyan, sight of a helpless person in the path of a flood. He didn't think. He moved. He splashed through the mud, the water already ankle-deep and rising. He reached the tree, the wind trying to push him over. He fumbled for his knife, his wet fingers slipping on the smooth metal. He got it open. He looked up at the sign. The rain was streaming down the wood, making the burned letters look like they were bleeding. Only the pure of heart may cut her free. He looked down at Kai. Her eyes were wide, fixed on his knife, then on his face. There was no judgment there, no. Only a human plea for life. I don't know. He yelled over the scream of the storm. His voice broke. He wasn't talking to her or to the sign. He was talking to the whole canyon, to the storm, to himself. I don't know if my heart is pure, but it's not leaving you here. He grabbed the rope above her right wrist. It was swollen tight, slick with rain. He sawed at it with the knife. The tough fibers resisted, then parted with a snap. Her arm fell loose, limp. He moved to the other wrist, his body shielding her from the worst of the rain. Another hard sawing motion. The second rope broke. She was free. She collapsed forward, her muscles giving out after days of tension. Eli dropped the knife and caught her before she hit the mud. He half dragged, half carried her heavy, soaked weight away from the tree, towards the rocky overhang where his saddle was. She stumbled, her legs numb, and he held her up. They fell into the shallow cave together, gasping. The roar of the storm was muffled here. They were out of the drowning rain. They were safe. Kai lay on the ground, breathing hard, rubbing her raw, bruised wrists. Eli sat beside her, his own breath coming in ragged pulls. He looked at his hands. They were dirty, scratched, trembling. He had done it. He had cut her free, not because he felt pure, but because, in that moment, leaving her was impossible. It was a choice of the gut, not the spirit. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the small shelter, there was a strange, exhausted quiet. The deed was done. The rope was cut. Now, they could only wait and see what that meant. The storm passed as quickly as it had come. The roaring flood in the wash became a muddy trickle, then just a damp streak in the sand. The last of the rain dripped from the edge of their rocky shelter, making a soft plink sound in the new quiet. Kai sat up slowly, moving her shoulders in careful circles. The deep red grooves from the rope were angry on her skin. She didn't speak. She just looked at her wrists, then out at the washed clean canyon, as if seeing it for the first time. Eli felt a deep, trembling emptiness. He had done the thing. He had cut the ropes. Now he didn't know what came next. Was she supposed to just walk away? Was he? The weight of the choice was gone, replaced by a flat, strange quiet. He got up and walked back out into the damp air. The world smelled of wet stone and sage. He went to the juniper tree. The two cut ends of rope hung loose, swaying a little in the breeze. He reached up and carefully pulled the sign free from the nail. The wood was cold and wet in his hand. He didn't know why he took it. It just didn't seem right to leave it there. When he turned, Kai was standing at the mouth of the shelter. She was stretching her legs, testing her balance. She walked over to the base of the juniper and picked up the leather satchel that had sat there through it all. She opened it. Eli expected clothes, maybe a canteen. But it wasn't that. She pulled out a handful of small, plain deerskin bags tied shut with sinew. She opened one, tipping a few seeds into her palm. They were dark and uneven, not like the perfect seeds from a store packet. "These are my grandmother's beans," she said, her voice rough from disuse. She opened another. "This is the corn from the field by the old hogan, the squash that grows well with little water." She looked at him. When a person is taken out for the sickness, they bring seeds. Life that is waiting. In case the person returns, they bring new life back with them. In case they do not, the seeds are given to the earth here. She held out one of the small bags to him. Eli just stared at it. "Take them," she said. "You cut the rope. The act is done. Now you must plant something new. It is the way. You cannot just walk away empty." Hesitantly, he reached out. The deerskin was soft. The seeds inside made a tiny, whispering sound. He put them in his pocket, next to his closed knife. It felt like holding a secret. Then Kai reached to her neck. She untied the thin cord and lifted the small, intricately woven basket pendant over her head. She held it out to him, too. "This is for protection," she said, "and to say thank you. You saw a person, not just a problem. That is a good heart. Pure enough." Eli took it. It was lighter than he expected, delicate but strong. He didn't know what to say. "Thank you" didn't seem right for something this big. "What will you do now?" he asked. "I will go home," she said. She said it with a new certainty, like a fact decided by the storm itself. "I will see if the cough is better. I will see if the air in the house is clear." She shouldered the satchel with the remaining seeds. She gave a small, tired smile. "You should go home too, Eli." Home. The word felt different now. It wasn't just a roof that needed fixing and empty pens. It was a place. A piece of earth. Maybe it could be something else, even if it wasn't what he dreamed. They didn't say a long goodbye. She turned and began to walk, steady and sure, up the canyon trail to the east. He watched her until she rounded a bend and was gone, just a memory against the red rock. Eli packed his things. He slid the wooden sign into his bedroll. He tied the small basket pendant to a cord on his saddle. He mounted Duke and pointed him east, but not the same way Kai had gone. His own way. Back to his own life. The ride back felt shorter. The land didn't look so broken, just different. When his ranch came into view, it still looked poor and worn. But the feeling in his chest wasn't the heavy dread he'd left with. It was a tired calm. A cleared-out feeling. The next morning, he didn't saddle Duke to ride the fences he didn't own anymore. Instead, he went to the tool shed and found a shovel and a hoe. He walked to a patch of flat, sunny ground behind the house, near the old windmill. It was a spot his mother had once tried to grow flowers. He started to dig. The earth was hard and dry on top, but darker underneath. He worked up a sweat, turning the soil, breaking up the clods. It was simple, good work. When he had a decent patch cleared, he reached into his pocket and took out the deerskin bag. He made small holes in the earth with his finger, the way his mother had shown him as a boy. He dropped in a few of the dark corn seeds, a few of the beans, covered them gently. He saved the squash seeds for the edge. He carried bucket after bucket from the windmill tank to water the dark rose. It wasn't a ranch. It was a garden. A small, foolish thing in the middle of all that space and debt. Anyone seeing it might laugh. But as he patted the last bit of soil, he didn't feel like laughing. He felt solid. He hung the wooden sign from the ranch house porch, where he would see it every morning. Not as a judgment, but as a reminder of the question asked in the canyon. He touched the small basket at his saddle dot. The story of the cowboy and the woman in the tree became one of those quiet tales told sometimes. People wondered if it was true. Eli never offered the details. He just tended his garden. The seeds, from a place of deep struggle, took root in his own broken ground. They pushed up green and strong into the sun, a different kind of life, born not from what was taken, but from a choice to cut something free.